Hello and welcome to Leader Breeder Podcast with myself and your host, Aidan Jeffrey. Leader Breeder Podcast is a leadership podcast dedicated to helping you discover and develop your leadership voice in your life, career, ministry, and business. And in this month's episode 39, we're talking about birthing new things as we are approaching the end of a year and preparing for the birthing of a new year. I want to speak to us in this month's episode, preparing your hearts, your minds, for what does it take to birth a new thing, to establish new things, to take something from a concept and bring it to completion or bring it into fruition in the marketplace, whatever it is, business, a church, whatever it might be, a career shift in some shape, form, or size. So let's get ready for this month's episode 39, Birthing New Things, and I'll see you on the other side of this. Well, episode 39, this month's episode, Birthing New Things. And I want to talk to us a little bit about how do we birth something? How do we take a new idea, something that's in our mind, our heads, or perhaps in your career, perhaps if you're a pastor and in ministry listening to this, how do you take something that you want to expand, you want to add something new to your ministry, whatever it is, birthing new things. And I was speaking a while back in the church about a podcast that I listened to a while back where they spoke to a South African economist, a well-known South African economist, and they asked him, what would he say is one of the biggest causes of the unemployment rate in South Africa at the moment? We've got a very high unemployment rate in our country, and the numbers vary, but often it moves between 39 or 40% or sometimes 45%, depending on who's doing the surveys. But whichever way you want to take that number, it's a very high number. And of course, we know when there's unemployment, it always leads to, high crime, high theft. Why? Because people are desperate for livelihood. They're desperate to eat. And so then when there's not job creation or there's not ways in which a person can occupy their time, find a purpose, something to live for, something to wake up for, something to go towards, the Bible says our feet and our minds start to run towards, crime and starts to run towards the wrong thing. So as leaders, as, a pastor who leads a congregation, as a previous businessman, I know what it's like to have to establish something or to birth something, to pay salaries every month. It's a never-ending story. But this economist went on to answer the person who was interviewing him, and he said to him, what do you believe is the reason for a high unemployment rate? And his answer was quite interesting. And I agree with him in the sense that he said that we're sitting with a generation right now, and it's not a color thing, it's a generational thing, where he said that what you're seeing is that we've been, for 30 years in our country, in South Africa, we've been dealing with, redistribution of wealth and not the creation of new wealth per se. The focus has been, and rightly so, rectifying the wrongs of the past. And so we started to see the new government in our country start to instill, certain rules and certain sort of preferences in the marketplace, BEE, etc., etc. And I'm not anti any of those things because a person has to rectify something in some shape, form, or size. But what we started to see was, what the economist was saying, was that what's happened is that the people that the generation that was, previously disadvantaged was then told by the incumbent government that, well, we have to rectify the wrongs of the past. So the conversation started to dominate, the dominating conversation around the tables and around the governments and around the economic sector was we have to give people things that were maybe incorrectly taken from them, or we have to redistribute wealth, we have to involve people. And so the conversation became taking what was already there and shifting it around and giving people, better options to careers and to lives. And so children started growing up. The millennials started growing up listening to conversations around the table about, well, somebody else is going to give my parents something, or somebody else is going to give my parents, a business or a business opportunity or shares or whatever it is. So the conversation was never about telling a child at a table, listen, you're responsible for your future, birthing a new thing, taking responsibility, establish a new thing. The conversation more about went about, well, we're just going to wait until that thing comes through and then we're going to have something. So people weren't birthing new things, they were just receiving new things. Now, again, I'm not trying to labor a point, and the purpose of this podcast isn't about a political angle or anything like that. It's simply, what do we do now with a generation that does not really know how to birth something new? You've got a young generation right now entering the marketplace who very often looks at a challenge and goes, well, it seems hard to me, but I know that when it was hard, my parents were given something, or my uncle was given something, or, we received something that already was. I was reading an article recently about our railway systems, our Transnet railway systems in South Africa, and they were reporting that they are now going to privatize the railway systems. And everybody was applauding and saying, long overdue, great initiative, because a lot of our railway stations in South Africa have been, vandalized and really are not even, you can't even use them anymore. Now they want to privatize the railway system. And yes, the article said that, cargo is now going to be transported, new tonnage, taking pressure off the road systems. And again, applause, well done to all in sundry. But the reality is this, is that railway system was already there. That railway system used to carry a lot of cargo. And based upon a sort of a pause or a window period of up to 30 years, while we are rectifying the wrongs of the past and while conversations about, we're going to block things, we're going to limit things, we're going to slow things down because of the unfairness of the past, the culture in our generation, in our country started to shift towards somebody's going to give me something versus I must birth something. Now, again, I'm going to, for the sake of not sounding like a broken record, I don't want you to receive this as those that received something were wrong and those that had something were wrong or right. This is not a political angle. It's a podcast to stimulate in you, the listener, to say to you, are you a person who has ever birthed something new? Do you know what it's like to birth something new? And if you take that further, from a generation that were sort of given things because of rectifying the wrongs of the past, the flip side is also true. You had a wealthy generation who had things, and they did the same with their children. They started to tell their children, well, don't worry, we'll remove all the blockages, we'll take all the obstacles out the way, and we'll give you things that you also didn't build. We'll give you things that we have. So you had a more affluent or a wealthier portion of our country. You had a more sort of sort of a part of the population that did not have much, and both sides were almost causing the same problem. The one side was saying to their kids, the wealthy side was saying, we'll remove everything and we'll also give you something. So there's a generation that doesn't really know how to birth something. Another generation was sitting around the table saying, well, my parents were wrong, so they're going to be given stuff, so we also don't know how to birth things. And now you've got two incumbent flows, and people go to varsity, they've got careers, they've got all kinds of things that are happening in their lives, and they are intelligent. There's no difference in intelligence from this generation to previous generations. There's no difference in anything. But the difference is that the previous generations, both, whatever color, whatever culture you come from, we weren't given handouts. People were given a sort of a small sort of a push in a direction, and you had to make things work. You had to birth new things. So that's why I want to challenge us in this month's episode to ask ourselves the question, as a young person, if you are young, listening to this today, maybe, between 18 or 30, I would go as far as to say 30, that generation, maybe between 18 and 30, is, have you ever birthed something new? Now, I'm not saying every person is like that, but I'm saying a vast majority. Our university entrance levels were sort of modified in order to accommodate more people. And again, I say rightly so. But when you make something easy and you drop standards in order to rectify the wrongs of the past, and you don't keep the standard within that organization the same in order to, teach people lessons, so things start to become easy. And when things become too easy, we don't really understand the price that needs to be paid in order to birth a business, for example. So you have a lot of turnover. You have people starting businesses, stopping businesses. And when it gets hard, it's like, I don't know what to do. So we start to hear terms like mental illness is on the rise. And there's a young generation that doesn't know how to handle life. And yes, I agree. I mean, I'm sure mental illness was in my generation. I think back in the days when I lived with my parents. They used to charge me rent every month. Yes, I had to pay rent to stay with my parents after I finished my military service. While I had a job, I had to pay, for ironing and washing, and I had to contribute towards the upkeep of the house. And then when I left the home, they just said bye, and there was no X amount of money or nothing. I actually remember I got a bit of back pay in the army because I got rank in the army, and they short paid us for a season. There was a technical error, and when I left the army, they actually gave me a bit of a back pay, and that back pay actually helped me to buy my first clothing for my first job. And my first job was an entry-level job, and we had to work our way up the ladder if you didn't have a degree or you weren't privileged enough to go to university. But today you've got people with degrees that are unemployed, because having a degree does not guarantee you are able to, get a job, or you're able to establish something. So that's the challenge for this month. I want to talk to us about birthing new things. And from a scriptural perspective, I want us to have a look at Luke 5:36. And Jesus is coming to birth a new thing. He's coming to birth a new covenant. He's coming to birth something that he wants to establish on the earth. And what does he find? He finds a generation that is stuck in the ways of the old. Now, not to get into too much of a doctrinal or a spiritual angle in this podcast, but I want you to see the same thing took place in Jesus' time. Luke 5:36, the Bible said, "Then he spoke a parable to them, and he said, no one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one. Otherwise, the new makes a tear, and also the piece that was taken out from the new does not match the old." Verse 37, he says, "And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, or else the new wine will burst the wineskins and be spilled, and the wineskins will be ruined." Then he goes on to say, verse 38, "But new wine must be put into new wineskins, and both are preserved. And no one, having drunk old wine, immediately desires new, for he says the old is better." So we see this parable of Jesus speaking about the introduction to the Jews in Israel about a new covenant. They are under the old covenant of Moses, so you see the new and the old analogies he's using in this parable. And he says that no one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one. So we start to see, he's starting to drip feed the Jews to say, you guys are saying, that the old is better. We want to hold on to the old. But the old was causing burdens. The old was becoming obsolete. The old was good for a time, but it wasn't, sufficing for the new. If you look at, in our country, getting back to the economist, who was referring to the fact that we're dealing with a generation who only knows or understands more the redistribution of wealth as opposed to creation of new wealth. So he was saying that when our governments changed hands 30 odd years ago, he said there was an infrastructure built for a certain portion of the population. And then we said, well, now it's open to the whole population. So we took an infrastructure that was, let's say it was made for 30 million people, and we said, well, now it's got to work for 60 million people. And so whilst there were certain things that were new, and I'm not saying nothing developed in our country, I'm not saying nothing was birthed, I'm not saying no new things have come out of our country in 30 years. I'm speaking about a mindset of a young generation that is entering the marketplace, that sat in conversations, hearing about the fact that things were going to get given to people, or wealthy parents gave their children stuff as opposed to teaching their children to birth new things. And that's what I'm speaking of. I'm not saying our country hasn't done anything. Of course, we've birthed incredible new things. But the infrastructure is always under pressure because we're not, speaking to a wider population to say, hey, all of us are responsible to build an infrastructure for 60 million people or 70 million people and not just for 30 million people. So you start to see, the people that have got infrastructure or have got, business, operating businesses, more pressure gets placed on a certain portion of the market to pay higher taxes, to do certain things, because we're trying to play catch up. But at the same token, I believe we have to shift that mindset. We have to tell a young generation that, you are responsible to not just take what is there and redistribute it towards you or to your parents or towards somebody else, but actually, are you able, and let's teach each other how to take something that's not there at all and put it there. How taking a piece of dirt that there's got nothing on it and putting a new thing there. building something brand new, establishing a whole new idea, birthing a whole new business line, birthing a whole new business concept, taking a concept in your mind, putting it out there, getting an infrastructure around it, starting to trade with it, starting to put, clientele in it, starting to show profit in it, and that thing enters the marketplace, and bam, we've got a whole new vein of job creation, and that's going to take away drop the unemployment rate little by little. But if you and I and everybody else would do the same, we'll start to see incredible change within our great country. That's why countries that have got low unemployment rates of 4% or 5%, they complain at those percentages. But then you take it a step further, that if you've only got an unemployment rate of 4%, that means 96% of the working population is contributing. But if you've got an unemployment rate like South Africa of 40%, 45%, you've only got 45% contributing. So the pressure on the 45 who are contributing is 10 times more, almost double, if you can put it in numerical terms, than the countries that have got 96%, people contributing. So you start to see even ideas come to market, and people bring ideas to market and they say, this is a great new idea. And in a country like ours, we look at it and we go, we see the idea, we love the concept, but when we bring it to our country, there's only a 45%, possibility of people being able to buy, purchase, or, add value to that product. Whereas in other countries, ideas work quicker and faster because there is a greater population or portion of the population able to purchase or buy or have expendable income. So it's a sort of a knock-on effect, a domino effect, and at some point you have to accept the fact that we haven't got a lot of jobs to employ the 45%. But if everyone will take responsibility, and if our language will start to change around the boardroom tables, and I believe if every entrepreneurial endeavor in our country, every government organization will start to incentivize, tax breaks on people that have actually not just employed people, but have actually birthed a new business. If you take a business in the entrepreneurial sector and you say to a businessman, if you can prove to us and you can show us the registration documents of a new business that's birthed out of your business, doesn't have to be in the same business, can be a new business, but if your business has contributed to put that thing in the marketplace and it is a established running concern, if it lasts for a year, a certain amount of tax break. If it lasts for 2 years, 3 years, and as long as that business lasts, your tax breaks stay in place for the current company. So we have to incentivize people not just to, contribute towards impoverished sector of the market. I believe we have to say to people, take responsibility for someone with potential. Let's start to find people that are entrepreneurial in their makeup of whatever color, culture, age, and pull them into our world, take responsibility, raise them up, and then send them in the marketplace outside of the four walls of the current institution to establish something new, put something new there. And when that new thing is established, it's going to create more work. And if you can have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 new businesses created in 1 year, if 10,000 businesses will take responsibility and be incentivized by government in order to birth 10,000 more in 18 months or 12 to 18 months, we're going to start to see a huge change in creativity, responsibility. We're going to start to see massive, ripple effects and domino effects on the positive side. So are you a person that is entering the marketplace, or are you in the marketplace? Have you ever birthed something new? Have you ever taken something that wasn't there without your parents or the government or somebody giving you a handout? I'm not speaking about having an investor. I'm not speaking about somebody, giving you money as an angel investor or as a partner into your organization or whatever it is. I'm not speaking about a venture capital sort of deal that you do and there is an expected return on that investment, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what I'm speaking of. We all need to have, people to help us. But I'm speaking about just a handout. Sort of there's no ripple effect. There's no consequence if it fails or succeeds. Why? Because it doesn't matter. I'm just going to get more somewhere else. And I think that's the language that has to change. We have to start to help people, but hold them fully accountable. I was speaking to somebody a while back as well, and they told me in a conversation, they said to me, yes, but if you give me R1 million, was a young businessman, and he said to me, but if you give me R1 million, I know I'll make a success of my business. So I said to him, okay, if I give you R1,000,000 and how are you going to pay it back? And it was almost like I threw, cold water over him. It was like, what do you mean I must pay it back? So I said to him, well, why don't you then go to the bank and loan R1,000,000? He says, no, he says, the bank's full of red tape and the bank wants this. I said, but how do you think, life works? How do you think that you advance if you don't have to give the person who's giving you the money a return on their investment? And it was almost like, I could see the mindset was like, well, I can't go forward because I don't have money, but if you give me R1,000,000 and don't worry, I know I'll succeed. There's no thought in I'm going to pay the R1,000,000 back, or I'm going to, I have to make enough money, on the new venture to pay my staff and run my organization and then still pay the loan back. No, it's just a matter of, well, give me R1,000,000 and then I'll make it work. And then what about it? I walk away, you walk away. And if it fails, you just go, oh, sorry, I'll just find another R1,000,000 from somebody else. And that's the language I'm speaking of that has to change. We have to be very intentional to say, not criticize our government or criticize our country, because we've all got reasons to criticize anything. But I believe it's a time for us to understand the importance of birthing new things, of, taking, helping somebody to a certain amount of time to get on their feet, but then making sure that thing is able to stand, and then once it stands, there is a new running concern in our country. So let's have a look at Proverbs 24:3, another verse we'll look at in this episode. Any enterprise is built by wise planning, becomes strong through common sense, and profits wonderfully by keeping abreast of the facts. So if we have a look at the common sense of, running a country, the common sense of running a business, sometimes it's not that common, and we look online and we go, but this youngster is 20 odd and he's making 100 million, and this youngster's 15 or 20 is an influencer. And so we look at people's lives and we say, you can make money online, and you can make money online. You can do a lot of things that you couldn't do years ago. So let's not criticize the new things. Let's not criticize the new ways of doing business, but let's be very sure and let's be very intentional to say, are we able to understand that can we birth something new? And that's my challenge fundamentally around this episode this month, is to say to you, whatever it is, we can pull it into, have you ever planted a tree and the thing's grown? You've birthed a new tree. It's as simple as that. Have you actually done something without, I've got a life, I've got an infrastructure, I've got a bed, I've got a car, I've got a, petrol, I've got a job, but everything's dependent upon, someone else. There's a backstop, there's a catch-all net. I know that if this doesn't work, I'm just going to carry on with no thought of the possibility of failure, that it's going to actually cost me something, because somebody else is just going to give it to me, or somebody else is going to write it off, or somebody else is just going to, I'll just go somewhere else, I'll just do something else, or I'll just live with my parents again for another 2-3 years until such time as I'm back on my feet. And I think, without sounding harsh or without sounding critical, I don't say kick every child out the house, but I say we have to start changing the conversations around what it takes to advance a nation, what it takes to advance a city, what it takes to advance an organization. It's a constant sort of intentional process to birth new things. Now, let's have a look at what Jesus said in Luke chapter 5. He said this, he says, so no one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one. So we start to see, to birth new things, we need to understand that new and old don't always go together. Now, is there an old covenant in the scripture? Yes. Is there a new covenant in scripture? Yes. And Jesus was telling us that the new and the old don't match. They're not meant to be together. The new is what it is. The old is what it is. But the new is called new because it's going to be different. It's going to have a different flavor. It's going to have a different impact. It's going to perhaps accelerate something, or it's going to add to something. But the old, we're not discarding the old immediately. We're not throwing it out. But the old eventually will become obsolete. And the Bible speaks about the old covenant in Hebrews chapter 8. It says that the old was becoming obsolete. So the old was fading away. And we all know in the natural lives of people, we're getting older. All of us are aging. 50s and 60s and 70s. And so what happens is you start to fade away, in the sense of your body starts to age, and you can't do things you could when you were 20, 30. That's why you look at your young sportsmen now. There's a point when a tennis player, for example, who was a great, gets to a point where he just keeps getting beaten by a 22-year-old with talent, and he's 35. Why? Because the physicality, they can't keep up anymore. But if they were both 22, and, would it be different? Of course it would be. And then you start to see, well, they announce their retirement. So the old eventually becomes obsolete. Always remember the old, always acknowledge the old, always talk about the old greats. But guess what? They are not the new marketing talent. They're not the ones that the sponsorships are putting their money in anymore. Why? Because they had their turn. And so when it comes to our country, it comes to your life, what are some of the things that are old in your life? And you might be young in natural age, but what are some of the things that are old that you need to start to rethink a few things? What about, are your habits the same old habits, same old routines? And Jesus said that if you want to start to birth new things, he said that a new piece of cloth, for example, we don't just go and buy a piece of cloth to make a pants, and we take the piece of cloth and we patch it to the old pants. He says, because the old pants is worn. The old pants is on its way out. The old pants is going to become obsolete. We might cut up that pants and use it as rags or whatever it is. But the new needs to be remade or remanufactured or newly manufactured with new material in order to become a new pair of pants. And that's what Jesus was saying. He said the new is going to be different, it's going to be better, it's going to be quicker, it's going to be faster, it's going to be more liberating, it's going to be more freer, whatever it is. He said, but what you must understand is you can't mix the two, you can't patch the two. And sometimes that's one of our biggest problems, is we don't want to let go of the old, we want to hold on to the old and then just patch something new on it. And Jesus said it's not going to work. Why? He says, otherwise the new makes a tear. Now, when I did a study on this, when I preached this in my church, not the same title, the same content, but the same scripture verse, and that word tear in the Greek means schizo. So, where we get our word schizophrenia or schizophrenia. And what Jesus was saying was that when you take something new and you patch it onto something old, he says the new is too vigorous, it's too fresh, it's too full of energy, it's too sort of agile to want to just camp and maintain on something old. So he says what? He says the new wants to make a tear. The new always wants to break away. And let me add this to what I'm saying today, is that if you start to see frustrated people on your staff or frustrated people in your organization, and they want to break away, they want to do new things. It's because why? Because they're desiring something bigger and fresher. So the new always wants to break away. It doesn't want to maintain. It wants to advance. And so Jesus says, if you patch the new and the old, he says the new is going to make a tear. It's going to cause a schism, a void. It's going to cause a gap. And that's where we get our word schizophrenia. And so we're sitting with a lot of schizophrenic in the church, for example, if it comes to a spiritual perspective. You've got Christians trying to maintain the old covenant under the law of Moses, and you've got the new Christians who are born again through the shed blood of Christ, and they're mixing the two together, they're patching the two covenants together, and so you've got this constant, sort of oil and water. You've got this guilt, grace, free, bound, feeling good, feeling bad, loves me not. This constant conflict within the body of Christ, because we don't understand that the new and the old were never meant to be together. The new it's for now, and the old was when it was. And so it is in business, so it is in life. What things in your life right now are, for causing schisms or causing schizophrenia, causing double-mindedness? So I'm not sure. I don't know. It's because you're mixing the old and the new. But the new, what? The Bible says, Jesus says, and also the piece that was taken out of the new does not match the old. So take a car, take a vehicle. You can't take a new car. I mean, for example, let's take BMW, for example. If they launch a new X5, for example, let's say, they bring out a new shape, X5. The X5 of 3 versions back, the X5 of 2 versions back, it's old. It doesn't look the same. So the value of that old BMW drops significantly because the new is better, and people want the new. So people start to buy the new BMWs in the case of a launch of the same model but a different shape. even the shape, even the specs, the inside, the lines on the vehicle's body, the steering wheel, the interior, the lights, the technology, everything is better. But they don't take, an old BMW and say, well, we're just going to patch a few new things onto the old and keep the old, but just going to patch a few new things. Now, do you get remodeling of cars? Yes. Do you get restoration of old cars? Sure. There's a model for an old, sort of as a hobby, but it's not an economically sustaining business model. Why? Because the old had its time, and we can have vintage, and we can have remembrances of the old, and we can have, motor shows where we display old cars, and it takes you 3 years to restore an old car. It's fine. That's a side hustle. But if you want to, establish something new, the Bible says you have to have new thoughts, and you have to have, new challenges, and you have to have a new mindset or a new cloth, and you have to have a new wineskin. Then he goes on in the next verse, verse 37, he says, and no one puts new wine into old wineskins. So he uses material, then he uses wineskins as two analogies of something new being put into or being put onto. So the cloth was on and the wine was in. And he says, or else the new wine will burst the wineskins. So again, he says the capacity of the old can't handle the capacity of the new. Take a car, for example. You can't you can't compete. If you take an X5, for example, the example I used, the kilowatts power in the car, the Newton meters of torque, you can't even compare what because they've upgraded the technology, the engines, the designs, the power is more. People are learning more. They're seeing other people get better at things, so by the time the new comes, you can't put an old engine into a new body. You have a new engine and a new body. And Jesus says you can't put new wine into old wineskins. He says what? Or else the new will burst the wineskins. And what? And he says, and be spilled. So he says, so the new is spilled. And so that's a word for somebody today. How many new opportunities are being spilled in your life because you are refusing to grab hold of the new? You still want to patch something onto the old, or you want to put something into the old. So that's why you have to understand the opportunities are not that they're not there. It's they're being spilled. They're being lost because of the reluctance to want to put a new idea into a new structure. And that's important to understand. And he says, and the wineskins will be ruined. So notice he doesn't say the new idea per se, because that new idea, if you're not going to be able to capture it into a new wineskin, somebody else will. So the idea, any idea that has arrived in its time, it'll survive. But he says the wineskins, the old, will be ruined. So he says sometimes we're actually causing a ruining to our own organization, to our own life, because we're trying to put a new into the old. And he says that's going to cause what? The wineskin to be ruined. The old is going to be ruined, not the new. So you need to put new into new. And so verse 38 says, but new wine must be put into new wineskins, and both are preserved. So notice, preservation or sustainability comes when new goes into new. So what is there in your life today that you are holding on to the old, or trying to force something new into something old? Now, speaking to businessmen today, we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, everything that we've done, we're going to throw it out. You can take a department or elements, you can add something new to your organization, and the old can still continue to generate income, for you. But you don't now fall prey to, well, that's it. I listened to this podcast and the guy said, chuck everything out. I'm not saying chuck everything out. I'm saying if the new is going to be introduced, let the new be part of the new, keep it there, and then let the old run on its old structures. But if the new is starting to grow and expand and, then add more value to that, eventually you might find that the new might become the sort of the lifeblood of the organization. It might become the saving grace for the organization. But have the wherewithal to actually pivot across and say, at what point do we trade off closing the old down and now only doing the new? At what point do we do that? So I say this to you as well. New wine must be put into new wineskins, and both are preserved. So new structures, new systems, new ways of doing things. Yes, can we Tarzan approach? Can we, Tarzan grabbed onto a rope in the jungle, and then he started to swing. Then he grabbed hold of the new one, and he held on to both at the same time, and he started to swing. And at one point, when the new was strong enough, he let go of the old, and he grabbed both hands onto the new. And that's the Tarzan approach. Or you can do the parachute approach. Is I'm going to run, I'm going to jump out and hope this parachute's going to open. And if it doesn't, splat, I'm going to crash and burn in my new business venture. So I always believe in the Tarzan approach, just for wisdom, because any enterprise is built by wise planning. So no, government or business owner just discards the old immediately and just takes on the new. But you can integrate new into old, and eventually you might transition totally that the new becomes the face of the organization, or you could even run them simultaneously for a while. But eventually that old might, just need a new jacket. It might just need a new upgrade or facelift. So don't use your discernment there. But the challenge to us for this month is: are we afraid to let go of the old because the new is challenging, or the new is daunting, or the new is unknown? So that's what Jesus says in verse 39. And no one having drunk old wine immediately desires the new. For he says the old is better. No one just runs to something new and says, that's it, game, set, match. Thank you, linesman. Thank you, ball boys. No, we always want to just check it out first. And nothing wrong in checking out something, but don't get stuck in the old and refuse to bring in the new. So we see that new wine must be put into new wineskins, and both are preserved. So the new doesn't match the old. New capacity does not fit into old systems. And the new must be established on its own next to the old or within the old. And then Jesus says this in verse 39, like I said earlier: no one having drunk old wine immediately desires new, for he says the old is better. So that speaks to, be careful of people that give you advice that aren't maybe invested in your career, your life, your ministry, and they start to say things like, yeah, but if it was me, I wouldn't do it. Or, well, I wouldn't go to, to that brand of car. I wouldn't do it. Why? Because the old is better. And sometimes could be right. In some situations, the old is better if it comes to certain, fake or frauds. But Jesus was very clear. He said that the reason people don't experience the blessing and the joy and the breakthrough of the new is because they say the old is better. So be careful of your language, of always holding on to the past. The old is better. The old is better. And sure, the old, like I said, had its place. But now there's something new. And God says, what? I will do a new thing. You will see it right now. I will create a new heart in you. I'll take the heart of stone out from a spiritual perspective. So God is the God of a new. He gives us new mercies every morning. We have new days and new minutes and new hours. We have new ideas. We have new thoughts. We have new breaths. We breathe. As I've spoken into this podcast for the last while, I've been breathing in and out all the time. So every breath was new. So that's why you must understand God is always into something new. Just look around you. Look around at your mobile phone. Look around at the television sets. They're now smart TVs and smartphones, and they're upgrading phones. And look at our vehicles, and look at our technology. Look at our AI is now new, and people look for devils under every bush, but it's new. And so the old is better, but the new is going to disrupt the old. The new is going to burst the old. The new is going to eradicate the old. Digital money, cryptocurrency, it's all demonic, and Christians always want to demonize everything. And I say this to you as well: be careful that you aren't just losing out. The new will be spilled. There's opportunities you're missing out on just because you're ignorant or you're stuck maybe in a rut. And there's old saying says the difference between a groove and a grave is just the depth of the rut that you're in. So it's just the depth. The grave is deeper, but a groove is got it's a rut as well. So if you're in a groove and it's going towards the new, well done. But if you digging that groove deeper and deeper and it becomes a grave, be careful. Why? Because it says any enterprise is built by wise planning. Proverbs 24:3. become strong through common sense. So don't allow your spirituality to rob you of common sense. You know, Jesus had common sense while he was a spiritual man. Jesus used common sense. I mean, he told his disciples, cast your net out on the other side, and they caught a huge number of fish. Jesus multiplied fishes and loaves. Speaking of what? Just using common sense. He divided the people into groups of 50s. He told the disciples to collect the leftover baskets, and there was 12 leftover baskets, which they then must have taken home for patkos. So there is always, Jesus used common sense. It wasn't like he was, you know, just a spiritual being and everything was spiritual. Use your common sense. Ask yourself the question, is my organization, is it going forward? Is it stagnating? Is it regressing? Why? And what's causing that? It's most likely, you know, it's a sign to you that there's something new that needs to be added or something old that has to be let go of. So don't allow yourself to be caught in the sort of no man's land of procrastination, of uncertainty. The Bible is very clear. God is the God of the new. And as we come towards the end of this year, and as we head towards the beginning of a blessed and a prosperous new year, what will you birth in 2026? What will you birth next year? What will you let go of from 2025? What will you leave behind? Or what will you start to investigate, seek, knock, and ask to see, where am I falling behind with regards to, you know, my ways of thinking, my ways of doing things, the way we do church. You know, are you doing it the best way you can? Are you stuck in old systems? The way you do business, the way you distribute your products, the way you serve clients, the way you get new clients, the way in which you market yourself. Are you falling behind? Are you criticizing the new? Are you saying the old is better? And I want to encourage you to change the language. The language of the old must die, and the language of the new must be celebrated. Not criticizing, not rejecting the old, but being willing to let go of the old. Why? Because all of us, you know, look at the earth today. In 100 years from now, think about that for a moment. Everything you are worried about, everything I worry about, everything that we are concerned about. 100 years ago, we weren't even on this planet. And there were people running this planet on behalf of God, and that were worrying about things that never, maybe ever ended up happening. And so Jesus said, why do you worry about your tomorrow? Can you, with worry, add a bit of hair to your head? Can you make your stature taller? He says, why do you worry? Don't you know your God shall supply? So God is with you. God is for you. God is in you. But you have to make up your mind. I'm going to be a person who's going to birth something new, birthing a new business. Now, don't quit on the process of birthing that new business, because the minute a young generation that doesn't understand the price that was paid by a previous generation, they think, well, it can't be God's will if I go through battles. No, do not grow weary while doing good, for in due season you shall reap if you do not faint. So let's be a generation that births new things. It can't just be my generation and the ones before me that birthed everything new. What about this current generation? Will you be a financial contributor? Will you add value to the marketplace? Will you take responsibility to employ staff? Will you employ people? Will you pay salaries and not just earn a salary? All those are requirements for infrastructure of a nation to advance. So our country is blessed. Our country is great. Look at our rugby team at the moment. We are the current double world champions, and we are streaks ahead of the rest of the world teams currently. Why? Because our coach brought new innovations. Criticized. I mean, they're always trying to change the rules based upon the way we play rugby. Why? Because our coach is an innovator. Our coach is somebody who is bringing new things to the table. He's trying new things. He's doing things that, normal rugby teams aren't considering. And when he does it on the field, everyone's up in arms. Half the people love it. Half the people criticize it. But guess what? The results are inevitable. He's winning. Everyone's playing catch up to him. Why? Because he's putting new into new. He transitioned when it came to captaincy and came to leadership and came to the way in which he approaches the game. And he's got a whole lot of tactics and strategies and new things. And it's exciting. The crowds are fuller. The sentiment around the sport is greater. Why? Because somebody was willing to push the boundary. And I say this as well. Notice the sport hasn't disappeared. The old rules have changed, but the rugby is still rugby. But what has he done? He's put a whole new jacket on top of the current international team when it comes to our country's sport. So what will you do this year, for the remainder of this year? And I want to encourage you to take time over December. I want to encourage you to take time to actually sit and ponder a few sort of routines of your life. Which of the routines of your life must change? Old eating habits, old exercise habits, bad things that have crept in. Are you willing to shed some of that weight? Are you willing to get rid of that debt? Whatever it might be. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but let's be intentional. We're going to be a generation that's going to birth new things. Parents, if you've got millennial kids or you've got kids at school, start to change your conversations. Start to have birthing new things conversations. Start to teach your children responsibility. Help them to start a YouTube channel or help them to do, lawn mowing in the street for a term to raise money. Waiter. Let them go waiter. Let them go and serve. Let them go and earn their own money with boundaries and with your guidance and your support. But don't rob them of birthing their own new thing. Help them to birth their own new thing. Don't you take away the obstacles. Don't remove the obstacles. Guide them, stand next to them over the obstacles, but let them feel the sense of accomplishment. And when they feel the sense of accomplishment, they're going to become responsible people in the marketplace. They're going to say, thanks, Dad, thanks, Mom. I've got this now. I'll walk by myself. And that's exactly what we need to have in the marketplace. Business owners, help somebody else establish a new business. Help them through the potholes. Help them through the difficult times, the scary times. And when they stand by themselves and they can say, thank you now, I can stand by myself. Don't fight them and criticize them. That was your whole intention from the start, was to help them birth something new and to release that thing. So come on, I'm excited for your future. I'm excited for what's lying ahead. But I want to say to you, birth something new and don't run away from it. If you have a new idea, work on that idea. Share it with the people that you can trust. Get research, but don't quit on that new idea. Bring it to the marketplace. Take responsibility. Endure. See it through. Don't quit. But what are the old things that you need to let go of? Let go of those old things. And when you let go of those old things, watch what's going to happen. You're going to start to see a whole fresh new perspective. Your lens of viewing something is going to change. So come on, child of God. You've got this. God's got you. You've got God. You're an unstoppable force. So let's go into the remainder of this year with positivity, with an upbeat viewpoint or perspective of life, because no one puts a new garment from an old one onto an old one. We don't patch things. We birth new things. Amen. So I trust you've received something out of this month's episode, and go into the future. Come on. What is it in your life? Is your finances not where you want to be? Come on. Birth a new form of income. Birth a new channel of income. Birth a new stream of income. How? Find out. Seek, knock, and ask. Take responsibility. Don't wait for somebody to give you a handout. You do it. You've got it. You can. But guess what? If somebody else can make money, so can you. If somebody else can birth something new, so can you. Why? You just don't know how yet, or you just haven't tried yet. Now let's get busy. Let's get out there. Let's dent this unemployment rate in our country. We can, because God is on our side. And with God, we can do all things. So come on, let me pray for you. So Father, I thank you today. We come to you in Jesus' name. Thank you for this amazing privilege to be able to talk to a generation that is destined for greater things than the previous generation. Help us, Father, to understand the importance of birthing new things. You sent your son to birth a new covenant. And they were so angry with new things, they actually planned to kill him, to crucify him. So when people come against us, when people criticize us, when people don't believe in what we see or don't want to support us, let us not grow weary. Let's not turn back and wait for a handout, but let's be intentional. Let's birth something new. And I pray for every person that's listening today that has a new idea in their heart. May they keep that idea in their heart until they have the right person, right place to share that idea with people. So Father, just release over everyone listening to this podcast this month, fresh, new, witty inventions, a peace, a grace upon their lives so that you've gifted them for something specific to live their lives for. Besides you, but in their natural careers, Father. You've gifted them with talents and gifts, and I pray they will see those gifts and use those gifts for the good of mankind and for the glory of your kingdom. So we just release this over everybody today in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Come on, have a great month further, and watch out for our New Year's episode launching in the first week of January. We're going to have an amazing 2026. Have a great rest of the year, and I'll see you next month in our next episode. Be blessed.
Thank you for joining us here at Leader Breeder. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to catch the next episode every month.